All right, hello and welcome. So before we get into today's video, we have a sponsor for today's video, and that sponsor is The Ridge. The Ridge makes high-quality wallets out of metal and elastic that save you space and time getting to the things you need. I've personally used and loved them for years, but they also have a 45-day risk-free return policy, so you can try them yourself. So if you'd like to get yours today, head to theridge.com/brozime and enter code BROZIME at checkout to get 10% off and help support the channel. Thanks so much to The Ridge for supporting the channel themselves and sponsoring this video. Now, let's get into it. All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the new augments for a few different Warframes. We have the new Grendel, Wisp, Protea, and Zephyr augments to be discussing, and we are going to go over them in reverse, how good they are order. So that means we're starting with Grendel's, who has the worst augment of the bunch, which clearly of these Warframes, he needed the least help. That's definitely how this works, even though we just made a video on how Grendel could really use a boost up. But unfortunately, Grendel receives the worst augment of the bunch for this round, which is Hardy Nourishment. So Hardy Nourishment clears status effects if you use Nourish, and you gain 2 seconds of status immunity for each victim in Grendel's stomach. So this augment both has too many requirements and also is not an effect that Grendel wants, and is also not an Exilus mod, which is dreadful considering what else you can use to get basically this exact same effect. So you don't need status immunity as Grendel. Just you plain and simple, you really don't. He's a huge tanky boy that's hard to take down, and outside of the occasional knockdown and then maybe sometimes a magnetic proc, status is really not going to affect him. And eating a bunch of enemies first and then using this to get that buff is just really unnecessary and not great. You can't use Nourish without enemies in your stomach anyway, but this really should have been just the duration of Nourish as the status immunity if it was going to be useful at all, because then at least it might be niche and you might want it to, like, I don't know, bring to Eidolons, so maybe you can get some status immunity for the magnetic wave, even though Grendel doesn't really go to Eidolons or something like that. And it's just a very niche, not good mod for Grendel. And if you were going to use this, you should instead, in basically all cases, if you have access to it, use Prime Sure-Footed, because sure, Prime Sure-Footed does not protect you from the vast majority of statuses. It only protects you from knockdown, which does count as a status. However, this can go in the Exilus slot. It doesn't require you to use any energy, and it has 100% uptime with no work from you whatsoever. This is more expensive, but it is basically superior in all ways. And if the only other thing that you're worried about is magnetic damage, there are arcanes for that are also more worth your time and honestly not that hard to get. So this augment just has a lot of trouble being useful, because if you're going with the plan of being in Pulverize all the time, this does nothing. If you're going with the plan of not being in Pulverize all the time, then you almost certainly don't need the status immunity for Spectro Belch, and you're kind of just wasting your time doing that because you should just be eating every single enemy you see anyway. So real weird choice of augment. I really wish Grendel had got something better to help boost him up to the level of, I don't know, all the other Warframes we're about to talk about that got better augments than him. But it is what it is. So next, let's talk about Protea, who got the third best, I suppose, augment. And that augment is her Repair Dispensary. So you hold to create a dispensary that will revive the Sentinel or Companion MOA of a player within 14 meters every 60 seconds. So if you had told me, I don't know, 3 years ago that I was going to have this ability, that would have sounded really useful. But at this point, we have the infested cats, and they are invincible by default, which means they keep coming back, and they have Animal Instinct, and they can hold Fetch, the vacuum equivalent. So because those cats exist and they can do that, there's a very limited scenario where you will ever want to use this. And those are basically, you're using Helios in new content, and you want him to scan everything, so you want to make sure he lives. Okay, sure. You can make the small sacrifice of this mod that I guess would usually be Augur Message, probably, for a little bit more duration on Protea. And you can make that sacrifice and you can use Repair Dispensary. Sure, you can do that. The other situation is maybe you're helping some new players and you don't want their Sentinels to die, and you're also just kind of there to help and not really, like, just speeding through the mission and doing it for them. because you're helping some new players figure out what's up with Warframe. Sure, maybe you'll want to revive their Sentinels. That's one more thing for you to do while people are figuring the game out. Also, a hyper niche scenario that's not going to come up very often. So, what about the last one? The last one is you're doing Railjack, and Protea is already a very good Railjack pilot, and you want to bring Nautilus so that you don't have to repair your Railjack. That one's maybe honestly the most realistic scenario of these three, because Protea is a very good Railjack pilot because she has Dispenser. And this just makes it so you can easily keep Nautilus alive so you don't have to repair your ship, which is fine. All these scenarios, though, are really hyper niche. And the one other use that you honestly should not do is that because this is a different dispenser and you hold to create it, it does look different, but it still really does look like a dispenser. So you could troll people into thinking this is a dispenser and it's going to shoot energy out. And that is maybe the best thing that this does realistically overall, is that you can just fuck with people. So that's kind of all right. I guess there's that. But yeah, this just came way too late in just like the life cycle of Warframe. We really don't need to revive Sentinels anymore. That was a request of a gear item as far back as I can almost remember Sentinels existing. So yeah, it's just not a great thing on Protea. I'm definitely not just going to be bringing this around with me wherever, because instead of using a Sentinel, I'm going to be using one of the infested cats or a Smita. That's just pretty much how it's going to go. Next up, let's get into the better augments, but these augments, I will say, are better, but both of them are maybe a little buggy. Specifically, Zephyr's is very, very buggy, and that is airburst rounds. So each enemy hit by airburst increases secondary damage by 25% for 14 seconds. So this one, if you're going to be using secondaries a lot, and you know the Kuva Nuke War exists, so you might, this is going to increase your secondary damage by a lot. So no matter what your power strength level, this caps at 500%, which is a really good chunk of damage. The problem with this is that it is not 500% just after every other multiplier you're used to, which would be insane. It is an additive bonus with Hornet Strike. And what that means is that it works like the damage buff that Chroma gets. So in order to use this most effectively, what you're going to want to do is actually remove Hornet Strike from your secondary and replace it with like another elemental or more crit damage and what have you. So you can do that, and you can go through, you know, kind of the hassle of doing that in order to make your secondary way, 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 way better. Which is fine. That's totally a viable build that you can do. And even with like the lower strength, where like I'm getting 17% per enemy and it lasts 21 seconds with the additional duration, because I have so much range, this should build up really, really quickly to 500% as long as there's kind of any amount of enemies around. Should be super simple to get this buffed up. And you can refresh it by hitting an enemy, so you don't need to like continually hit a huge group to get this big buff. You can just build it up after casting Airburst multiple times, which is really nice. Some weird stuff that is probably bugs with this. Airburst is the helmet ability of Zephyr, so you can put this on other Warframes. Airburst rounds works with, to my knowledge, Balefire on Hildren, but does not work with Titania's 4, her Dex Pixia, or the Peacemakers of Mesa's 4. And all three of those are considered to be secondaries, so it's very strange that one of them works and the others do not. So right now, I can't advise you to put this on Titania or on Mesa, as much as those would probably be cool gimmick builds for those two Warframes to build around, more specifically probably Titania, because they appear to not work. So that's unfortunate. Maybe in the future that will be patched and that it will work, which would be really nice, because specifically on Titania, that would be a really nice burst of damage for her, and she wants to be casting all the time anyway for her 4 augment, so you could really get something going on that Warframe in particular. With that, let's show this one off real quick so you can kind of see how it works. And the detection on it actually like increasing your damage also seems kind of buggy. So we're going to throw in here like 9 enemies. So you can see, you know, this is like kind of a regular group of dudes. You can see it increasing initially, and you'll see that there's some like whiffs here. So even though I'm hitting a bunch of enemies still, sometimes it's just not going up for kind of no reason at all. Like it's still hitting enemies here, but it's just not counting them. And I don't know why that is, but it's clearly just a bug that also hopefully gets worked out. And when it does, this ability will be more consistent and better. I will say that in just general mission doing, Usually it being kind of buggy doesn't prevent it from getting to 500% very quickly, but it is just something to point out while we're here, that this ability seems to be having kind of the most trouble of any of the new augments in terms of working. Now, let's talk about the best augment of the new batch, Wisp's augment. So, Wisp, already like the best support in the game, basically. Incredible Warframe that you can literally take anywhere. Absolutely fantastic. So, what if we made her better? So, we have Fused Reservoir. Adds a 4th reservoir that gives the effects of all 3. Costs 200% more energy. Now, you'll notice that this is an Exilus mod. So, if you're not using Prime Sure-Footed like I am, this can just go right into your Exilus and not really mess with your build in any way, essentially, which is absolutely fantastic. And what this does is it basically just adds a huge amount of convenience to Wisp. And that has a lot of value, actually, because you can just place one and move on. Now, it does say here that it costs 200% more energy, but that's actually a lie. That's not how much this makes it cost. So on here, you can see the energy cost is energy drain 200%, and then the regular drain is 31.25 energy because I'm at 75% efficiency. So what this says is energy drain 200%. And what this says is 200% more energy, which would be 300%, just so we're clear. And it drains for, if we switch to it, it drains for 62-ish, which is only 200%. It's double drain, not triple drain. 200% more is triple. Just so we're clear that this augment doesn't do what it says and might be bugged. It's a bug that would be advantageous to all people that are going to play Wisp, and I think it's very worth it to cast this for this price. But yeah, just a thing to note here that this energy cost might go up in the future, so maybe think about that before you make any huge efficiency reductions to your Wisp, just so you know. But yeah, the huge convenience of this, it's absolutely fantastic. It does count as 3 reservoirs, so it counts as 3 going into your cap of 6. So if I go ahead and place down 1 vitality reservoir, it will eliminate that one. We can place up to 4 of these until that one goes away. So you can have like all these, and then this one will count as 3, so only 1 of these will go away, and so on and so forth. So just keep in mind that you can only have 2 of these reservoirs up at a time, but because they're so much better, and usually like the best place to use this would be whenever you're just moving through a mission, you're just going to drop this, get all your buffs, and just like continue moving on your merry way, as opposed to having to cycle through each one and cast each one every single time. Huge convenience add for just general mission running for Wisp, and is great. What a good augment, especially because it is in the Exilus slot. One other thing to note on this is that I do have this on tap to switch. The other thing that this does is that you can invert that so that you have to hold to switch, and then it'll just your universal reservoir will just be on tap then, which means you can cast it faster because you don't have to wait to hold for it to understand that you're trying to drop your reservoir. So it also kind of makes it faster to cast it in that very small way. Also, funny thing to point out, it still says placeholder on the universal reservoir down there. Just a funny thing there. But yeah, that is, all the new augments that we have going forward. I think Wisps is going to get used a ton just for the huge convenience factor, and just, making it that little bit quicker to use her most used ability. And yeah, it's great stuff. Hopefully the Zephyr one has some bugs worked out and that it starts working with Mesa's 4 and Titania's 4. And hopefully Grendel gets some love later because he's gonna need it. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me for this video. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything in terms of these augments, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.